Hi, I left this review for a very long time for a reason. I wanted to do it right. The review today is about Milestone by Armaf. Club de Nuit Milestone, if that's the full name. All right, I've had this for about 3 months, I think, or two and a half months now. And I have worn maybe a quarter of it. I've given it plenty of wearings and plenty of chances. And I'm going to give you my thoughts on this. It's going to be a little bit different to the takes and the reviews that you've seen of this, that I've seen of this anyway, leading up to my eventual purchase and testing. So here we go. Everybody knows, and this is not a secret, that this is a clone of Creed's Millesime Imperial. Cool. That's out of the way. However, it's not really the clone of the Millesime Imperial. It's very well known that Creed has batch variations because apparently of all the natural ingredients that they use, and so therefore each batch sort of smells a little bit different to the others. That's really not the best explanation of why this actually doesn't smell like the Millesime Imperial. It kind of smells like the current interpretation of Millesime Imperial, and I'll get to what I'm talking about soon. Now, most people that are reviewing this, even the people that think they know Creed very well, weren't really alive to know what Millesime Imperial actually smelled like when it was first released in the mid-90s, 1995 as a matter of fact. Now, if you think about 1995 and the fragrances that were actually in fashion, you're thinking of things like L'Eau d'Essai, CK1, and then probably the next year after that, Acqua di Gio. And also fragrances like New West had also been released. And the reason why I mention New West is because of its use of Cologne or Cologne, which has it's a note in perfumery which gives off this watermelony, fruity, sort of salty kind of smell. So this aquatic sea salt kind of smell and watermelon at the same time, or fruity sort of notes at the same time. And that note was prevalent in quite a few fragrances as well. Not just those popular ones, but less popular ones as well. Now, I didn't smell Millesime Imperial when it was released in 1995. Not even close. I had no idea what Creed was back in the mid-90s because I was still doing designers. Niche wasn't really a thing back then. Creed was trying to start it off and everything, but it was all about the designers because the designers were actually releasing things that you wanted to buy, that you were satisfied with because they were quality. They did things that was cool. They did things that were different. They weren't going off, ooh, what can we release that will have people buying it as much as possible, rather than what can we release that's actually going to complement what we're actually going for in this season's fashion lineup, okay? But I did get my first taste of Millesime Imperial. I still remember it because I was at a family friend's new apartment and I went with my best friend there, and this new apartment was in the port, let's say Port Melbourne, that's where it was. And it was really, all these new apartments were going up. It used to be just docks and sort of warehouses there, and they just redid it. They put all these new apartment buildings up there in the hopes that they would be creating a nice little cosmopolitan hub over there with restaurants and sort of nightlife spots and things like that. The thing is, nobody fucking moved into the place, so it was like a ghost town most of the time. But my family friend, he had purchased an apartment there, a 2-bedroom apartment, and he was living there by himself at the time. And we went to visit. So it was a pretty cool apartment, and it was about 2001 maybe? I can't remember exactly, but it was the early 2000s. I went to the bathroom, and there I saw a bottle or 2 bottles of fragrance that I had never seen before, a brand that I had never seen before. He didn't have any designer brands, he just had these 2 bottles there. One of them was Green Irish Tweed, and the other one was Millesime Imperial. And I thought that, oh, these look like, you know, fancy kind of knockoffs of actual brand name perfumes, because of the Millesime Imperial came in like a gold bottle, and it had flakes that came off it, so it looked like it was a piece of cheap shit. But I did go ahead and open it up, and I smelled the lid, and I thought, ooh, okay, it kind of smells all right. And I sprayed a few sprays on me and was blown away by that rush of sort of juicy, fruity notes. The salt was in the background. It wasn't there. It didn't even become prevalent later on in the mids or in the dry down. It was all about that cologne, that fruity burst of fruitiness, and that it had the aquatic, it had the salt. You could definitely tell it was there, but it wasn't the main player. And I believe that saltiness really wasn't a main player until about late 2011 or early 2012, when I believe the fragrance actually changed a little bit and brought that saltiness to the fore. And maybe that was the fashion of the time of the early 2010s, I guess, moving away from the old cologne and maybe somewhat towards saltiness in the notes, so amping that up and muting the fruitiness. So that's the difference in the scent. Now, I remember the impression that the original Millesime Imperial had on me when I smelled it. I had that sort of, it was vivid. It was vivid because I had never smelled something with such quality, so photorealistic. It was just, it's so photorealistic, but at the same time, it was not an edible thing. It wasn't a gourmand or anything like that, but it was definitely, it still definitely smelled like a fragrance, but it smelled like a fragrance that was for someone who was older than me at the time. And the family friend that we were visiting, he was older and he could pull that off whilst I was still wearing things like Aqua de Gio and Pie by Givenchy. Well, no shame in that. Anyway, that's it about my memory of the scent of Millesime Imperial and sort of testing it throughout the years later on and finding that it had actually changed from my first impression, because my nose is actually quite good. Like when I go back to my vintage fragrances that I had smelled growing up, if I acquire them from somewhere else, it really hits the mark on, yes, that's what I remember smelling when I was a kid, and now I've got this vintage and it smells exactly like what I remember it. So my nose has pretty much stayed the same. I believe the scent has actually changed, and like I mentioned, the change would have come in like the early 2010s. For what this is, Milestone, it is a very, very accurate representation of the current formulations of Millesime Imperial, which has that saltiness up front and then the fruitiness out back. And I also read that this, much like Millesime Imperial, takes a few months to actually mature, because when I smelled this straight off after I opened it, I sprayed it on and I wore it and I was like, what is this stuff? I don't see how this is even close to Millesime Imperial. It smelled like nothing. It smelled like nothing, really. It did. It just wasn't even salt. There was no fruitiness. There was nothing at all. I gave it a few more wearings, and that was during hot days as well. And I thought I was doing it right, but I didn't. So I kept it and I wore it on and off. And the last couple of times, honestly, that I've been wearing this, it's really been working quite well. But again, I don't like the opening, that the saltiness is up front and the fruits are in the back, because I tend to think that that's the wrong way around for a scent like this. I do. This salt is nice, but I don't want to smell like salt. So there it is in terms of being able to clone something that's on the market today. Armaf do it quite well. They have a few hits, quite a lot of misses, I should say, but this is pretty damn good. Like this, I should show the bottle, but this is pretty damn good. And if you're in the market for a Millesime Imperial clone, I'd probably say get this over anything else. Unforgivable is unforgivable. Don't worry about that one. Don't even try to get that one. And there was another one, I think, that was a Millesime Imperial clone, which I don't think you should even touch. And I forgot the name, and that's good because I don't even want to say it. In terms of the clones of Millesime Imperial, Milestone's probably the best one out there. Now let's talk about longevity, because this does a better job at being able to stay on your skin and your clothes than Millesime Imperial does. However, hindsight is usually viewed with like rose-tinted glasses, but I will give it a reality check, because Millesime Imperial was never a longevity monster. Like you'd get like 3-4 hours tops, okay? Even on the old vintage batches, you'd still get 3-4 hours tops, okay? And I think the amping up of the salt note has done wonders for its longevity, because you'll get a couple more hours, because the salt notes really tend to cling on a little bit longer than fruity notes or citrus kind of base notes anyway. So there we are. Millesime Imperial, I think we talked more about Millesime Imperial than we did about Milestone in this one. So let's have a quick Quick smell, yeah. It's still there. I still smell ambroxan in here for some reason. I still smell ambroxan in here, and I'm not a huge fan of ambroxan, and I really don't want to spray this on myself, but I really have no other choice now, do I? Here we go. All right, great atomizer too. Yeah, like it's different from the first time that I tried it out, but it's still there. It's sort of like this dry, dusty sort of salt that's in here as well. And the fruits are in the background. And again, it's kind of warm here still tonight. It's just not for me. I will probably end up wearing this on occasion every now and then, but yeah, it's not for me. And look, I was never a big Millesime Imperial fan anyway, other than that first initial batch that they had in the 90s till about 2010, 2011. And look at this bottle. God, if you ever wanted to fingerprint somebody, just give them this bottle and say, hey, have a look at this. And then the entire history of fingerprints, every single fingerprint that they have will be on it. Ridiculous. A little bit of Millesime Imperial history for you. It did originally come in a gold-plated sort of bottle. It wasn't really real gold. It just flaked off, and there was quality control issues with the flaking off on the bottle. So they changed it to the clear bottle with the white sticker, and then they've gone back to the gold bottle. And I believe this time around, the gold is not flaking off. Of course, they used to come in like the full sort of millesime, which was the 120 ml or 4 ounce sort of bottles. Now they come in 100 ml or the 3.3, 3.4 ounce. So there you have it. This was my review on Club de Nuit Milestone. If you care about it, then now you know what I think of it. It's the current Millesime Imperial, but better, with less quality. But in the air, if you smell it, it doesn't make a difference, and it lasts a little bit longer. Much nicer on your pocket if that's something that you consider. However, it is nothing like the original Millesime Imperial, nothing like what made a huge impression, nothing like if you think about Millesime Imperial being Michael Jordan's signature scent, apparently, that's what I read. Now, think about Jordan in like 1995, king of the world at the time. He was already GOAT whilst still being in the league. And he was impressed with Millesime Imperial so much that he made it his signature scent. And I can see that based on the initial impression that I had with it, smelling it in my family friend's bathroom, and the impression it had on me was humongous. You know, I still smell it. I still smell it vividly. I still smell that memory. I smell that memory vividly. Wow, what a sentence. I smell that memory vividly, and it sort of just brings me back. I can even picture the bathroom and the apartment and the view and everything. It's amazing. And I think I'm getting that because I'm kind of smelling this on my arm right now. Yeah. Once that overall saltiness starts to dissipate and you stick your nose in there and take a really deep breath, you do get this. You do get that fruit. You do get that fruit coming to the fore, but it really takes a lot of digging, and I think it's too much effort. And there are way too many nicer fragrances for summer. If you like Millesime Imperial, then get Millesime Imperial. If you can't afford Millesime Imperial and you want to smell like Millesime Imperial, then you can get Milestone. But again, I would probably say that scent was released in 95, and I think it's of its time, and that time has passed. Some scent sort of profiles are kind of timeless, like, you know, Green Irish Tweed. It still smells relevant right now, but Millesime Imperial just doesn't smell that relevant anymore. And I don't care what anybody says about that. This is what I say about that. And that's most important to me, because that's what I say. There are far more interesting things being done these days with perfumes, especially in the niche side as well. And even on the designer side, if you don't mind that sort of step down in quality and perhaps in performance as well, and maybe even in presentation sometimes. So yeah, just don't keep holding on to things like that, because if you hold on to something like that, it ends up holding on to you. There's your lesson for the day. So there we are. That's my review of Club de Nuit Milestone by Armaf. Hope you liked it and hope you learned something new. Thanks for watching.
Versace.